Hi, my name is Ron, and this time we'll be studying a pictograph at Mount Sinai. Yes, a pictograph at Mount Sinai, which is, just so happens to be, the very first commandment.
The first commandment is Anochi Adonai Elohecha. I am Adonai, the Lord, Elohecha, your God.
Here we have a stunning narrative of the first commandment presentation. A narrative inscribed immediately after those incriminating tablets were smashed to bits by a furious Moses. Yes, here we have another smashing translation by your groundbreaking epigrapher, me. And a couple notes to begin with. Well, first by Isaac Newton, who said, "The more time and devotion one spends in the worship of false gods, the less he's able to spend in that of the true one." Quite wise. And by Martin Luther, who said, "Whatever your heart clings to and confides in, that is really your God, your functional Savior." Cute. And this first draft was first shared with my signal group way back in March of 2022. Current draft was somewhere around May 13th of this year. Here we have completely ad-free and free to share, however not to be sold or modified without the author's permission. Me. So, starting with some prolegomena. Now, just before starting this most daunting article, I was tuning into my daily dose of Greek, specifically tuning into an episode entitled The Heart of Interpretation, watching this extended episode with a mighty keen interest. Yes, I also wear keen shoes and happen to like Craig Keener. So with a keen interest in this particular episode, since I was anxious to see the present state of Greek diagramming, to see the present state of the art regarding Greek grammar and syntax, regarding the systematic ordering of words and sentences, an ordering that is often confusing in the inconsistent Greek, and also inconsistent in the much later Arabic. Yes, as you can see from some Al-Jalad stuff, it is a regional identifier. And this is an ordering that I studied only briefly in my BioWorks software with Randy leading that diagramming charge way back in 2004. Leading the charge following the short-lived charge of Eric Sowell's software back in 2002. With a Dan Wallace endorsed Leedy, now continuing that diagramming charge with Logos software. Continuing with Logos after my much lauded BibleWorks software dissolved back in 2018. Dissolved around the same time that BibleArc was on its rapid ascent. With me hoping that this BibleArc episode on DDG might help me with this present article of ours. Hoping that this episode might help me to arrange my own words and sentences just a wee bit better. Since that is what diagramming does, since it is structuring gone ballistic, or structuring gone syllogistic, for those with a poetic bent. With arcing helping you to develop visual relationships between the words and the sentences, which just so happens to be very important consideration in our present article, in our highly visual Proto-Hebrew. Yes, Proto-Hebrew. A very important consideration as we proceed in deciphering the visual elements of this incredibly important pictograph. An incredibly well-structured picture without any words whatsoever. That is, unless you call the nominative El, a word. Now, it's often been said that every translator is a liar, a bald-faced liar, since no interpreter could possibly capture all of the peculiar nuances of a native language. And to say that you definitely can capture all those nifty nuances is misleading at best. Now, I may not have captured all of those nuances in this most daunting article, but capturing some of those nuances is certainly better than none, right? Infinitely better than my peers can do. And that is my disclaimer for this translation as well, or rather for this short transliteration that I will now be presenting. No, you folks can do your very own interpreting from there. The onus is all on you now. Are you folks up to it? Cool. Let's go then. Now, despite the feeble disclaimer above, I am definitely going to get you close to the very heart of the interpretation here. I'm going to get you an awful lot closer to the goal of this pictograph. An awful lot closer to the mind of God. The mind that truly matters. Yes, a whole lot closer, even if it is far from perfect translation. Certainly not perfect in a BDAG or BDB lexicon sense. No, not in that exhaustive sort of sense, since I will not be providing you with every available translation option. Not providing you with every historical option, since that sort of database simply doesn't exist. No, not even close. No, this is prehistoric data, folks. This is pre-Paleo-Hebrew text. Just like 5th century Arabic is considered to be Paleo-Arabic text. And our Hebrew text in question precedes that Paleo-Arabic by nearly 2 millennia. Precedes what we call Paleo-Hebrew. And the precious little Paleo-Hebrew that we currently do have remains much of a mystery. Just as much Paleo-Arabic remains a massive mystery. Even AI and even Al-Jalad will admit to that. Which is to say, there still remains a great deal of heavy lifting yet to be done in this field, with scant few folks being able to do this, let alone get a passing grade. You can probably count them on one hand. On one comical hand. However, despite our uber scant database and uber unqualified personnel, I will still get you very close. I will get you incredibly close here. Incredibly close by employing the handy-dandy consonantal chart of Douglas Petrovich once again, along with other literary devices, rock-solid literary devices. Yes, I will be getting you considerably closer, even if I don't believe that Petrovich's chart is either perfect or exhaustive, nor believe that his acrophonic methodology applies in the least bit here. No, his phonics are not the least bit helpful here, but his figures and narratives certainly are. And for that, we are exceedingly grateful. So, with those above things in mind, let's tease out the fundamental understanding of this 15th century, yes, BC, epigraphy that I observed at the actual Mount Sinai. Yes, I have proven that location repeatedly, folks. In Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. Which is to say, let's get right to the heart of this primal engraving that we were so providentially guided to. That is, if you believe in provenience at all. Guided to by this mountain's most summiting explorer in modern history. Yes, it was a great, great honor to summit with him. A guide who is kindly known to many as Summiting Steve Parks. A Parks and Rec type sort of guide who knows his guidebook exceedingly well. Who knows his Bible exceedingly well. A guide that my wife and I were guided to while we were there in October of 2021, an unpublicized epigraphy that him and his wife had discovered about a month earlier, had discovered in plain sight at this incredibly pristine location. Discovered directly opposite of what is rightly considered to be the golden calf altar. Diametrically opposed, you might diabolically say. Epigraphy discovered on the altar of Moses' side. Discovered on the Mount Sinai side, rather than the wilderness side. With the mountain peak directly visible from there, just to the right of that righteous inscription. Golden calf altar. Pictograph panel. Mount Sinai panel. A blatant inscription, a mere 600 meters west of that iconic altar. A bold inscription directly facing that golden calf altar, just as if it were mocking that altar, just as if it were taunting that altar, daring that cow to make the first move. With a road paved with good intentions, separating their ideologies, drawing up their battle lines. A road that was wonderfully paved last year, uncovering artifacts, no doubt. Then, to add to that amazing correlation of ours, we have what appears to be a judgment seat nearby, a seat we read of in Exodus 18:13. Yes, this unlettered photo here. A judgment seat facing that altar as well. A judgment seat just a stone's throw away from our inscription. Nearly in line with our petroglyph panel. Yes, our groundbreaking Proto-Hebrew inscription. Proto-Hebrew inscription that told us how long it took those Hebrews to get there. Yes, Exodus 19:1. And here you may see that inscription as well. Label is number 32. With the ominous mountain peak also visible from there. Reasonably visible to the right of that seat, as may be seen from the screenshot above. An ominous judgment seat that is facing the east, wrapped in bold judgment of those encamped in the east. A seat for the great prophet to rule from. Yes, this unlettered photo there. An ominous judgment seat that is facing the east. A seat for the great prophet to rule from. How do you like that for a seat? A highly fitting judgment seat, a form-fitting seat, you might even say, almost in the form of a royal throne. A throne that would likely project some pretty awesome acoustics. I didn't have the audacity to test them out. An amphitheater seat largely shielded from the elements, with storage alcoves adjacent to that seat, perhaps for storing those intimidating tablets. Before the ark was finally completed to store them in, before that tabernacle was finally completed. And then, to add to that above correlation, we have what appears to be an auxiliary seat. Yet another judgment seat, about a stone's throw away from that Supreme Court seat. also facing that iconic altar. Again, with that mountain peak reasonably visible from there, visible just to the right of the righteous judge of that seat, as may be seen from the geospatial above. Once again, this is number 16, where that seat, auxiliary seat, is located. What might be considered a municipal seat, a court intended for those lesser disputes, those disputes that we read of in Exodus 18:26, a court somewhat closer to that now paved road, with a clearly wider roadway leading to it. No doubt, it was the road more traveled back then. So, what we have here in terms of artifacts is correlation upon correlation upon correlation upon correlation. Geolocation probabilities that you really ought to be fearful of at this point. So, even if you were not mentally moved by my earlier statistical analysis, by my earlier mathematical probabilities, you probably should be at this point. You probably should be at this point. However, that is getting away from our self-attesting inscription, getting away from our incredibly well-conceived and most deliberate inscription. No, that math, that's meat for another day, since you probably couldn't appreciate it anyway. But, to repeat, this is a highly visible inscription in a highly visible location. A location which was not the least bit hidden to anyone at any one time. Least of all to those Hebrews that were being judged by those nasty inscriptions. But an incredibly well-preserved inscription at that, just like those well-preserved seats. A most providential preservation, sort of like the Bible, huh? A prominently displayed description in a highly significant place at a very significant time, and thus an inscription that is neither meaningless nor mundane, neither menial nor trite. No, this is not crass graffiti, folks. Cut your crass somewhere else, okay? So, let's milk this proverbial cow for all it is worth then, shall we? So, without further ado, here is that proverbial cow for your exceedingly serious consideration. Yet another artifact that we will carefully milk. The photo I took less than a month ago. And here's a photo that was taken about 2.5 years ago by my dear friend, Joseph Cheatham, who I also met last month. Excellent photo. An artifact that has seen zero meaningful interpretation to date, since it seems no one has seen any significant patterns in that inscription, despite that above photo, yes, as well as significant others, being used in a patterns of evidence movie. So, prepare yourself for some exceedingly serious interpretation then, using the very finest interpretational aids available at this present time. And no, I'm not talking about technological aids, not talking artificial intelligence here. No, AI is zero help to us here. Nor are photographical aids all that helpful. not the lengthy photogrammetry, 360-degree, 3D, spatial, nor geospatial photography that I performed on this inscription. Not even the lengthy 3D scanning that I performed on this inscription. Rather, I'm talking about using epigraphical aids here. Talking about using your standard graphs and charts of the paleo industry, along with my solid additions, of course. And to that textual end, here is our good Dr. Petrovich's chart once again, an epigrapher that I have tremendous love and respect for, whose paradigm has considerable correspondence with mine, and an epigrapher that I've had considerable correspondence with. Yes, as I have had with a great many prominent epigraphers. Here's that chart once again. And we'll refer back to this in a bit. A very solid chart of Hebrew inscriptions, and I happen to like it. Like it a lot. Even if that chart has a markedly limited database. Yes, limited by its geography and its paradigm. And even if somewhat erroneous, well, according to Collis anyway. Still, a chart strongly endorsed by the matchless Miles Jones, who's not related to Andrew or Indiana, as well as endorsed by the Jewish prudent Jeff Benner, whose ancienthebrew.org site also borrows from the weaker Strong's, as in Strong's Concordance, which doesn't concord nearly as well. Despite all that, a highly underrated chart in the paleo industry, despite Petrovich building upon Gardner's seminal chart, as well as Albright's, as well as building upon the chart of his octogenarian mentor, Brian Edric Collis. Building upon Collis, yes, or so Petro tells me, even though Collis has far more inclusive paradigm and a far more inclusive geography, or so Collis tells me anyway. Collis, who is currently on a rampage against the establishment. Yeah. And a well-deserved rampage of that, kicking academic butt. Whereas Petrovich is still a wee bit stodgy. Yeah, still catering to the establishment, trying to change the system from within. A very lost cause, it seems. So, are you intrigued yet? Intrigued with what our methodology might look like? Yeah, good. And stick with us for the next part. Stick with us for a thorough examination of those stick figures above, since they are far more than figures. They are a serious narrative of life and death.